Okay, so in this video we're going to talk about the form and function of anatomy and physiology. We know that anatomy is the study of human body structure and their relationship to one another. So think about anatomical study as the sort of focus on the geography of the body and its internal arrangement. And this differs from physiology, which is really the study of function of the body parts and how they work together to help carry out life-sustaining activities. So anatomy is structure, physiology is function, and in this class we'll talk about both anatomy, which is structure, physiology, and function. So in terms of studying human anatomy, we can look at it in several different subdivisions. The first subdivision is at the gross or macroscopic anatomical level. And this is essentially a study of anatomy from large visible structures. When we look at the structure of the humerus, which is basically your arm bone. We can look at that in terms of its parts that are visible to our own eyes. However, there's a lot more structure that's smaller and not visible with eyes, rather with microscopes and other tools that you can look at smaller structure. Gross or macroscopic anatomy is a study of large visible structures, so at the eye level. Now, we can actually look at gross anatomy in a variety of ways. We can study human anatomy regionally, what this means is we can look at all the structures in a particular area of the body. In this class, we're going to look at systemic anatomy. So systemic anatomy focuses on just one system at a time. So we're going to study things like your nervous system on its own, your cardiovascular system on its own, and your muscular system on its own. And this is the type of anatomy we're going to focus on in this class. Now, surface anatomy looks at internal structures as they relate to overlying skin. This is more clinically relevant because you might want to know where certain muscle masses are, or certain veins or arteries might be just deep to the skin surface. So we'll go into a little bit on surface anatomy in this class. Now, other subdivisions of anatomy focus on things like the microscopic level, which deals with structures that are too small to be seen by the naked eye or unaided eye. So this is going to include things like cytology, which is the microscopic study of cells, and histology, which is the microscopic study of tissues. Now, developmental anatomy studies these anatomical and physiological development through life, and this differs from embryology, which specifically is a study of development before birth. We'll have a whole chapter on embryology later in ANP2, but I will introduce some embryological concepts in each chapter as we move forward. Now, to study anatomy, we have to know specific terminology, which we'll go over later in this chapter, and this allows us to observe, manipulate, palpate, as well as auscultate, which means to listen for certain sounds. So if you know certain anatomical terminology, we can do these particular things. Now, in terms of the physiology of the human body, we can base it on organ systems. So in this class, we'll talk about the physiology or function of your renal system, your kidneys, or your cardiovascular system, which is your heart and blood vessels. Now, physiology focuses more on cellular and molecular events that can influence, an entire system. And it's basically how our body can be dependent on chemical reactions within individual cells. So physiology is more about studying the function, and often this is at the cellular and molecular level. Now, to study physiology, we've got to understand different principles like electrical currents and pressure and movement, and different chemical principles. We'll have a whole chapter on chemistry in chapter 2, and we'll introduce these certain physical principles as we move forward and as they're needed. Now, anatomy and physiology are actually inseparable. We can talk about human body structure as being one thing and physiology or function as being another, but really they're interrelated. In fact, we call this the principle of complementarity, and this is where function reflects structure. Now, what we can learn from this is that if we know the structure, then that tells us a little bit about its form, but also its function. And they're very highly interrelated. If you know if this example is pretty classic. If you know the structure of the heart, that helps you understand how the heart works, right, in terms of pumping blood.